So that went to like through the 1530s. This sort of the good time. And then in the 1540s, like the captaincy system was created. So the captaincy system was Portugal's answer to the Economia system. The Economia system was like it worked down here in Peru too, by the way. You know, get an Indian family, start your own plantation. Great. Captaincy was like, well, we don't really care that much about controlling people and having some complex system, so we're going to pick like 12 dudes and give them different parts of, you know, Brazil, tell them to run them under certain guidelines. Not really sure what those were. Like, I'm honestly actually not sure what those were. But the problem was that not all land is equal. Like, all of this is the Amazon rainforest. And so, like, 3 of the captaincies didn't even bother to, you know, colonize their area because it was in the middle of the goddamn jungle. So that didn't go so well. And it didn't go so well until about, like, 1578, when the Portuguese king died. Why he would die here, we're not really sure. He was apparently leading an attack that went very poorly against the Moors. Reconquista. Still was sort of going on. I mean, really it ended in 1492, but North Africa was still very important for Portugal, especially for the slave trade. And this is where things started to get kind of weird. Like, and I mean weirder than normal, because Spain, Spain, Castile, Aragon, these were all united into what we can call Spain, the Spanish crown now. Spanish crown, Philip II, the most powerful man in the world, says, hey, Portugal, you don't have a king. Can I be your king? And Portugal's like, yeah, why not?
Super awesome.
So, King Philip didn't really have much to do with Portugal after that, honestly. He ruled for about 40 years, but he was very much into a Baroque system of government, where you didn't mess with them. I mean, it's sort of the same way the Mongols ruled the Chinese, and why China didn't really change that much during that time, was they kept the bureaucratic infrastructure. It really, I mean, death by absorption, essentially. Didn't do much. But at one point, kind of a funny little fiasco was their attempt to create a Brazilian justice system in 1586, in which King Philip was like, hey guys, do you have, you know, a high court or kind of, you know, mediation? Maybe that might, you know, stop all these people hacking each other to death with machetes in Brazil. And Portuguese were like, what is this justice high court thing we speak of? And so they talked about it, and they talked about it for 3 years, actually. And they decided to send a ship with 10 magistrates to Brazil to form the Portuguese the Portuguese high court in Brazil. And it didn't work because the ship sort of, yeah, got a lot of arrows on it.
More arrows.
More.
Yeah, I'm going to clean it up for a second. Sorry I'm going a little bit long. Feel free to skip out at any time.
I think we started like 5:30 anyways.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
so
we started relatively late.
Then we changed.
You haven't gone quite an hour yet.
Oh, okay, I'm right on track.
You can go like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So the ship boldly set out from Portugal, and then they decided and 20 years later, they sent another ship. That's the High Court of Brazil. So, I mean, to be fair, it wasn't entirely like they forgot. Like, they debated it for 20 years, whether or not they should have a high court. Some people really didn't think this high court idea was such a great idea. Took them 20 years. I'm not entirely clear on the specifics. My knowledge of why on earth they didn't just send some magistrates over is very cursory. So in 1606, High Court of Brazil is finally founded. Now, this is when slaves from Africa start to nothing. 1610. And you start to see these guys called bandeirantes. Not to be confused with bandits. They weren't exactly bandits. Think more like, have you guys ever seen High Plains Drifter? Think like if you took Clint Eastwood from High Plains Drifter, gave him a machete, and told him to go get slaves in the Amazon rainforest. Like, that's what these guys are. Like, they're basically like the Brazilian answer to cowboys. And they're terrifying people. And so these guys started power around 1610, 1615, and they started to attack the Jesuit allies, which the Jesuits didn't really like. So the Jesuits started building these things called reducciones, which looked like this. They're like an English town, English fortress, or Spanish fortress. They're pretty similar. Really, it was all based off French architecture, so.
Awkwardly European.
Yeah. So giant fortresses in the middle of the jungle. So imagine now High Plains drifter Clint Eastwood with machete and a hunger for slaves attacking gigantic Spanish or Paris-like fortresses in the middle of the jungle with machete, killing priests. Lots and lots of very
Sounds like
angry
a great
priests
movie.
with weapons, in fact. Now, the priests caught on very quickly to the fact that, well, inside there you have this whole group of really, really agitated people that we call Indians. And if you give them weapons, they will certainly fight for their freedom. So, I mean, if you've ever seen the movie Mission, you know that this ends badly sometimes. But, yeah, so, wow. That was a bad time. So, but of course we have the High Court, right? So we're all good. High Court. Unfortunately,
Seems like 10
in
of those guys.
1626, the High Court of Brazil disbanded until 1652. So no more High Court. So this war went on for about 40 years between machete-wielding Clint Eastwood bandits in the jungle, slave traders in the jungle, and Jesuit priests with angry Indians with weapons. So that went poorly for almost all parties involved. And then in 1652, they put the High Court back together. And in 1655, the High Court ruled that the Jesuits actually had, in fact, the rights to do with the Indian labor. That slavery wasn't really a good idea, especially when it led to, this crap. But now in 1650, though, the government actually really had a better solution than the High Court did, which was they realized that there was gold